Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, this is Leah Holt, your friendly neighborhood grant guru with Get Fully Funded. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to hang out with us for this webinar. I'm being joined by the one and only Miss Sandy Reese. Sandy, you want to pop in here and say hey?
Hello, everybody. We are so excited that you've decided to spend time with us today. We know there's a lot of other things you could do with an hour, and I'm super excited that you are here because this is a really valuable topic today, and you're going to get a lot out of this. So get ready to take some notes. Leah's going to give you lots and lots to think about today.
Excellent, thank you. And for those of you joining us for the first time, we absolutely welcome you. And for those of you who've been here before, welcome back. We do have a lot of good stuff in store for you today, but before we get started, let's do a quick tech check. If you can see my slides and hear me okay, will you let me know by typing it into the chat box, please? Alrighty. Just go ahead and pop it into the chat box and let me know if you can see my screen okay. All right, excellent, excellent. All right, so you guys be sure you're asking lots of questions as we go along, which you can do in the dashboard. And we should have time to get to them, but if we don't for some reason, I'll stay a few minutes extra if needed. Also, the handouts for this presentation is located in the dashboard in case you haven't had a chance to download them yet. You can use them to follow along with the webinar, and we've tried to include spaces in there for you to take some notes. And as usual, the recording will be made available in the Facebook group a little later today, so you can go back and listen to that later on. And all right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about program development strategies to make fundraising easier, and we'll be going over 5 key strategies that'll help you demonstrate to donors the positive impact your programs are making, which is what excites donors and makes them want to give. Over the years, I've helped develop and grow a wide array of programs, and I've been a program manager myself. I haven't just always done grants. So I'm familiar with the ins and outs of running successful programs, and most importantly, how to make those programs attractive to donors. How many of you have been in a situation with your nonprofit where you think to yourself, man, if we only had more money, things would be better. If we only had more money, we could start a new after-school program. If we only had more money, we could expand our programs and help more people. What I hear a lot from people is, we could hire someone if we had some more money, right? So my point is, more money always seems like the right answer, doesn't it? It's something we feel would solve all of our problems, yet so many nonprofits struggle trying to figure out how to get the funding they need. And maybe that's you right now. Maybe you're sitting there scratching your head and thinking that being so passionate about what you're trying to do, surely to goodness, should attract the right people and the right donors, right? You know, after all, you're driven by the desire to address the needs that are out there and to help make lives better. So why isn't everyone else? Why aren't they lined up at the door with their checkbooks out? But you know, you're not the only one out there, and you're not alone in your thinking. And you know, that's what I love about nonprofits. They're guided by this desire to do good and by their hearts, and they just want to help. And they see a problem in the community and they want to fix it. Plain and simple. Unfortunately, nonprofits can be tricky businesses to run because you have to spend so much time advocating for yourselves and proving yourselves to others in order to build a fan base and attract the people who want to give you the money you need. Just wanting to save the lives and just wanting to make a difference isn't going to get you where you need to be to impact things the way I think you intend to. The good thing is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of things out there you can do to help you bring in the money, just like fundraising, right? And programs are another way. And having well thought out programs with all the right pieces in place will attract donors to the impact you're making in the community and on those you serve, and they'll be driven to support you time and time again. Before we move on, let's take a moment to get on the same page about what a program is. It might seem pretty obvious, but sometimes I think nonprofits don't realize they have a program or that they even have multiple programs because they view what they're doing as one large activity, when in fact programs are in and of themselves a set of like activities with this particular long-term aim. For example, let's assume you're a dog and cat rescue. At a minimum, you have two programs. The first one is your rescue program, which is aimed at making an impact on intakes, right? So minimizing owner surrenders, reducing the number of animals from shelters that are in danger of being euthanized. The second program is an adoption program, and this one is aimed at making an impact on outcomes. So increasing adoptions and reducing the length of an animal stay. You see what I'm saying? So each program is focused on making its own impact. And taking time to really define your programs and highlighting what each is trying to accomplish can really open the doors to lots of different ways of getting them funded, which means you'll be able to go out and find the right donors. And I'll give you a quick example. When I was at Habitat for Humanity, we had donors who liked supporting our financial literacy classes for our homeowners because we were able to demonstrate to them that it helped produce financially responsible homeowners. So Bank of America was one of these donors. On the other hand, Bank of America wasn't into giving money for the home construction component of things. So being able to talk about our homeownership program by itself and the positive impact the financial literacy component had on its success really helped us get thousands and thousands of dollars from Bank of America year after year. And so speaking of impact, getting back to the point, more and more donors these days are wanting to know that your nonprofit has a sound plan to effectively carry out your mission. When it comes to programs, to address head-on what funders are what they're wanting to see, and to hugely increase your chances of getting the money you need, focusing on the following two questions will help guide you in developing effective programs. Plus, you'll be able to illustrate your intended impact, which ultimately enables you to be good stewards of your resources. And it demonstrates to funders what they want to see in order to make them feel confident about investing in your nonprofit. And so page 3 of your handouts is a list of all these questions, so you'll be able to follow along. So the first question is, what's the impact of the program? When you're thinking about your programs, you need to take a step back and consider for your nonprofit things like, what difference are you trying to make with it? How are you ensuring that what you're constantly moving toward, how are you ensuring that you're constantly moving forward, making that difference? And what indications do you have in place that lets you know you're succeeding? What this looks like when you're talking to donors or writing a grant request is something like this. You're not just saying, we want to save lives. You pivot away from that simplicity and you begin to use more intentional language, like, in order to save more lives, we will increase the number of people we serve by 20% with our services. You see how that works? So when you focus on impact, you're inclined to shape your programs around that and have more defined focus goals. So the second question is, how will the program be funded over time? Basically, how are you going to keep it going? You need consistent, reliable income, which is where things like fundraising plans are very useful, right? And also exploring other streams of revenue generation is really good. So maybe you could charge a fee for the services that you provide. What you can't do, though, is rely on sole sources of funding like grants. They're not intended as long-term funding strategies and are never, ever guaranteed. But aside from that, though, these two questions, when you take time to truly consider them and explore them, will guide you in developing fundable programs that donors want to invest in. So now, if you will, let's leave your organization behind for just a few minutes and pretend it just doesn't exist, okay? So go ahead and take off your hats there. And in its place, let's put on the hat of a grant funder. And let's take a moment to consider things from their perspective. And I like doing this exercise because it helps you see things a little differently and perhaps open your eyes to a new approach, and at the very least, maybe get an appreciation for what funders have to do. So imagine if you're running a small nonprofit. You receive over 300 grant requests once your deadline ends. And you're sitting there at your desk and you're staring out onto the stacks and stacks of paper on your desk. And you know you have tons of applications to sort through. As the sole staff person, one of your many, many responsibilities is to make recommendations to the board about which nonprofits should be funded. So let me ask you this. How are you going to determine who you give the money to? What will you look at? Maybe how long they've been around, what they do. What about the impact that their programs are making? Huh? Seems like you're being placed in a pretty hard spot, but I promise you funders are asking these type of questions and lots of other ones. And you know what? Donors are too. And it's not enough anymore to have that build it and they will come mentality, because you've got to shine, okay? And I'd like to think you prefer to move beyond a place where you're saying, we just need money to make things better, to how can this money help us make a bigger impact? How can we move our mission forward? And so now that you're thinking like a donor thinks, when you're trying to sift through a ton of people asking you for money, and trying to find that diamond in the rough, maybe, let's take a look at the two biggest questions they have. And the first one is, are we really making a difference in the lives of those served by the nonprofits we fund? Sure, they know nonprofits are out there trying to make a difference, but like you, they have goals they're aiming for too. They have a vision for how they like to see problems in the community fixed, and your job is to help them see that your programs align really well with what they are setting up to do, and that by investing in your nonprofit, you will put the money that they're giving you to good use. And so this is a little bit more of an external facing consideration that they have. And so then conversely, they have an internal facing question that helps put their minds at ease about handing out so much money to these nonprofits. And that leads me to the second question. Are the nonprofits we support good stewards of our money? So if you look at it this way, if I asked you to give me $1,000 to repair my car, you'd probably want to make sure, if you did that I would go out and do that and not go out and buy a 75-inch TV and a surround sound system, right? I mean, how would you feel if I did go do that? You'd probably be upset. Maybe even a little disappointed, to say the least. I'd be a little ticked. It's the same with donors. For one, they want to know you're responsible enough to handle that much cash. And two, they want to know you're using the money the way you said you would. They're trusting you, and trust is a hard thing to earn. And that's why donors are curious about your nonprofit's finances and your board of directors, and why you think your nonprofit is qualified to carry out the activities that you're proposing to do. Because if you propose one thing but turn around and do another, you're going to lose their trust. Whereas if you propose to do something and then deliver on your word, and maybe even over deliver, they'll view you as an effective partner that makes the impact they're looking for, and hopefully they'll want to fund you again and again. So I'm going to pause there for a moment, go to Miss Sandy. Sandy, do you have anything to add at this point, either about keeping these questions in mind and how doing so can position nonprofits for more money in the future?
Well, I think that one of the things that happens a lot of times is organizations think, well, we're a nonprofit, so people should give us money. And that might have worked in the 50s. It doesn't work anymore. And we have to be ready to answer some of these questions. And I love these questions, by the way. I think these are excellent to make you think and to get you into the mindset of not justifying your organization, but justifying your organization, to really talk about how you're making a difference and why it matters, to give funders and honestly all donors a good reason to care about the programs. If you think about it this way, there are 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S. alone. So for those of you who are outside the U.S., there's even more. I know we have some Canadian members and some members from other countries in the group. And if you think about, there's millions, literally millions of nonprofits out there, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself so that donors and funders care about what you're doing. And digging into these questions and answering these questions can give you that platform to do that, to be able to say, here's why what we're doing matters. So I hope everybody's taken some good notes, because this is really important stuff.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. So on the screen here, I have a quote from Stephen Covey that says, "To begin with the end in mind means to start with clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now, and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction." And I absolutely love this as a good reminder to always begin with the end in mind, and to strategically design everything you do around that, including both your fundraising and your programs. All right. So in terms of making fundraising easier, the 5 strategies we're getting ready to go through will give you what you need with your programs to demonstrate to donors your success. So the strategies are going to give you the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and all of which are vital components of effectively communicating how your nonprofit makes an impact on those you serve, and donors absolutely love seeing that. On page 4 of your handouts, you will see these 5 strategies listed, and again, there should be some spaces for you to take some notes. So the first one is building a strong case, and we'll go into each of these a little bit more in detail. But building a strong case statement is going to answer the why part of things. You're trying to answer the problem that's out there and trying to answer whether or not anybody else is providing these services. You also are going to want to define your target population and your service area, just so donors know precisely who you're trying to help and where you're trying to make the difference. With determining resources and activities, you're providing them with what it is that you're doing and the types of things that the types of activities that you're going to be carrying out. Excuse me. And gathering shareable numbers and stories, excuse me, I'm sorry, is going to give you what you're doing, what are the results, and showing how you demonstrate your success and what you're accomplishing. And then lastly, evaluating your impact and sustainability. There's that sustainability word that I get asked a fair amount about. It's just saying how you're doing, how you're progressing, and how you want to move forward with things, and then what funding you're going to need to make that happen. All right, so moving right along. By the way, in your handouts, I was going to tell you, in your handouts on page 4, 5, 6, somewhere around in there, you have a couple sheets that are called like program, project brainstorming worksheet, program, project description worksheet. In your own time, you can use those. So if you're trying to develop a program, or if you just want to take a step back and look at your programs, you can use those to start sketching things out, okay? So researching your problem, your need, and your demand. You're wanting to think about things like so if you're supporting students, how do you know the students aren't learning? How do you know there are animals out there that need rescuing? How do you know people are hungry or homeless or undereducated? Okay, so you want to go out there and figure out what the problems are, what the need is, and what the demand looks like for the types of services that you are going to offer. In your handouts, on page 7, there's also a handy dandy tool that we provided you, which is a national data resources page. So in it is listed a bunch of places you can go to, depending on the type of nonprofit you have, to do different research. Okay, so be sure you check that out. Secondly, in building a strong case, you want to research nonprofits delivering similar services. Okay, so what types of services, this is kind of like sneaking a peek on the competition. So what are they doing? How are they doing it? Have they been successful in what they've been doing? And it also allows you an opportunity to consider possible duplication of services, because donors don't like investing a lot in nonprofits that do the same thing or deliver the same services. And also this research helps you set yourself apart from the others by figuring out how your nonprofit is unique, okay? Then lastly, exploring potential collaborations and partnerships. So before you even go putting your program together or putting it out there to the donors, just do a little bit of research and see if there's some kind of way to partner with other organizations. Are there ways to share resources? So, I have a client who they have a free health clinic, but their health clinic is located in a building that's owned by the Durham Rescue Mission. And so as a result of that, they get deeply, deeply discounted rent. And then in turn, my client gives Durham Rescue Mission a little bit of a discount on services, or, they do extra things for their folks. So just look and see what type of potential collaborations, partnerships that are out there. All right, so moving right along, defining your targets. So one of the first targets that you're going to want to identify is your population. So this is who are you serving and describing that population. If you say we support low income or economically disadvantaged people, what do you mean by that exactly? Are you talking about people who are within the certain income limits? Or let's say you're talking about students, are you defining them as those receiving free or reduced lunches? And speaking of students, if you say we're going to help students, what kind of students? Are you going to help the ones that are in 3rd grade? Are you going to help freshmen? Are you going to help seniors? Like, what grade are you helping? If you say you're going to help youth or adults, what ages are you going to help? Are you going to help seniors who are 65 and older? Are you going to help teenagers who are 14 to 16? So be specific. Same thing with racial or ethnic targets, anything like that. If you're helping people that are English as second language, just describe all that, have all the information figured out for your donors and for grant funders. And then secondly, your service area. So this is where you focus your work. It's not necessarily where you're located, but it's where you focus your work. So is it urban? Is it suburban? Is it rural? Do you focus on a neighborhood? Or maybe it's a city or a region, or you could be statewide. And it might seem obvious to individual donors that you're approaching about what your service area is. But if you think about it, sometimes you apply to corporate sponsorships or even maybe grant requests, and those funders may not know exactly where you're located, or they may not be familiar with your geographic area. So just be sure that you're doing that for those folks and that you just have a really good idea of where your service area is. On page 8 of your handouts, I went ahead, I thought it'd be cool. I pulled some sample narratives from stuff that I've written for several of my clients. And so I wanted for you guys to see just, whether it was, you can use it for grants or whatever it is, just some narrative language around pulling statistics and that type of information, research, to discuss what the problem and need is in your community. There's one in there for defining your target population, and there's also another one in there for defining, there's a couple of them in there for defining geographic service areas. So be sure to check those out. Next on the list are resources and activities. So what activities do you want to complete, right? So this is just your general program activities. We're gonna serve homeless people food. We're going to build houses, whatever that may be. But you got to make sure that all the activities that you do within your programs make sure that those tie back to your organizational goals and also to the goals of your programs. And I'm going to give you an example here. Back when I was in Nashville, I worked for a volunteer resource organization. Okay, so our job was to connect people in the community who wanted to volunteer with community problems out there. So if you wanted to volunteer and you like schools, we'd connect you with the school. It's essentially the way it worked. So at some point, we got our hands on a plat of land that we decided we wanted to turn into this urban farm. And our intentions were to use volunteers to grow the food. And then with the food that was grown, we would donate it to the local nonprofits who were feeding folks, you know, who were feeding, I think it was like seniors, people who were food insecure. So at some point, though, we started getting into writing curriculums and teaching youth at other youth development organizations about nutrition and healthy eating. And we developed this summertime program, okay? And so all of a sudden, we were sitting here going, okay, after about 2 or 3 years, we found ourselves doing things that we weren't necessarily qualified to do. You know, sure, we're program managers and we can connect volunteers to places, but what do we know about curriculum writing? What do we know about, you know, dietitians and the things that they all know about? And so it was beginning to take us out of our wheelhouse in that program. You know, after all, we were a volunteer resource agency. So eventually we all stepped back and we started asking ourselves if this aligned with our mission, which we said, no, not really. So then we started taking away, or we saw that it started taking away from us engaging volunteers and in the upkeep and the maintenance of the farm. I'm sorry. So it meant that we weren't focusing on doing what we'd set out to do. So what we ended up doing was reaching out to local schools, and we helped them incorporate a farm-to-table education. And we started engaging local corporations as volunteers to teach these classes on behalf of the schools. And so we got back to our roots of connecting volunteers to the community need. And eventually we stopped doing the summertime program, and we turned our energy back toward the volunteer-focused activities. Okay, so sometimes you have to do that. Some people call that mission creep, but it's just a good idea to keep an eye on the activities that you're doing and make sure you don't get too far out of your wheelhouse and start doing something that isn't in your vision to do. Second question is, what resources do we need for these activities we want to complete? So do you need people? Do you need your employees or contractors or volunteers to get these activities done? What about training and skills and knowledge levels for these folks? How about things like facilities or supplies and equipment? Definitely money is always one. And when it comes to resources, you want to stop and think about 3 different things, and one of which is, you know, what do we have on hand? Let's take stock of the resources that we presently have on hand. And then let's take stock of the things that we need in order to get these activities, that we need to get. And then how do we go about getting the things that we need? And I've given here an example of some activities and resources that I pulled from drug abuse for teens type of application. So I just want to show you here, you know, the resources that they say, or let's say that activities they're wanting to do, for instance, is educational workshops at community health events in schools and classes. And so some of the resources they find that they need to do this, of course, time, money, and some staff members and a few other things. So I want to be sure to give you an example of that so you can see how those line up. And that's also available in your handout if you're having a hard time seeing what's on the screen here. Alrighty, moving right along. In your handouts, pages 10 and 11 is a section called Developing SMART Goals Worksheet. Okay, so in this, it's going to help you talk all about how you're going to define SMART goals. And if you guys have heard of SMART goals, you're probably rolling your eyes. If you haven't heard of SMART goals, that's okay. But what SMART stands for is specific, measurable, attainable, or achievable. Some people say achievable, relevant, and time-bound, or timely. Some people use that. So anytime you're setting out to talk about numbers, you want to make sure, or your objectives or your goals, you want to make sure that they are smart, okay? And so the handouts that we provided you will help walk you through the process of determining SMART objectives for your programs, all right? So as you're beginning to think through all of your programs, you always want to start with the purpose of what your program is. And as we walk through these next few slides, we're using an example from a client that we've helped. And so with them, they're saying the purpose of their program is to reduce the suffering and death of Liberian women in childbirth. So they're trying to reduce death rates among the children and the ladies. So you always want to start with what is the purpose, or the purpose of this program is to, and define that. Then you want to think about, as a direct result of the activities that you're trying to do, what outputs are you going to be producing? So what are the 3 to 5 things that are going to result from your program's activities? Usually this is expressed as just a number. So in this example we're using here, they're going to build and staff a professional birth center. So you can imagine that as being a 1. They're going to build and staff 1 professional birth center. Also, they want to implement a midwife training program. So again, 1. They want to implement 1 midwife training program. If you're able to produce the outputs that you're going for, then you should be able to move right along. And if you've thought through your programs, you can figure out what outcomes are going to result, that you're going to yield as a result of those. Okay, so because we deliver these outputs, this is going to be the impact. And generally, this is expressed as a percentage. So in this example, and what they've done, the outcome of those outputs, so the result or the impact of what they're doing in their activities and in the programs, they're going to reduce the maternal mortality rate by 10% within 5 years. The second one, they're going to 100%. They're going to see a 100% increase. So from 200 to 400 midwives, they're going to have a 100% increase in trained midwives within 4 years. So these are very specific. If we go back through our SMART, they're very specific. They're very measurable. We know they're attainable, because this client knew they were attainable because this is something that they could do. They're realistic for them, and also they are time bound. Okay, so collecting your numbers, getting numbers, figuring out what your numbers is a super vital component to being able to share numbers out to your donors. Another way to do that, of course, is with stories. And you've got pictures, you've got testimonials also, you have videos, and you always need to have plans for collecting this information so that you can use it to demonstrate what you've done. Okay, so this is where it's really important to work one-on-one with your marketing or your communications team to make sure that there's a plan on how to get some of this information out. And so I've provided you a screenshot here. This was something I came across the other day when I was flipping through LinkedIn. And so this is in Nashville again, and this organization had started a pilot program. And in the first year after the pilot program ended, what they found was that that they were piloting in experienced a 97% reduction in the number of student discipline cases. So it was reducing the number of children who were having issues with the discipline. And so they saw this as a success, of course. And as a result of it, the community is now wanting the school system to invest more money into this because they see it's helping the kids. They see that it's helping them stay in school or to stay focused and to have less disruption while they're learning. And what I love about this is the person who posted this is the president and CEO of a really, really, really well-respected foundation in the Nashville area. So it's pretty cool that not only is the school getting attention, but you have a funder that is working on your behalf to get your story out there. And, you know, in a place like Nashville, when you see this person, you go, oh my gosh, you know, this person really supports what they do. And donors tend to take notice of things like this, and they want to click and they want to learn more about this and they want to get involved. And a little while ago, I mentioned another way of collecting information that you can share is with testimonials. And in page 13, excuse me, on page 13 of your handouts, we gave you some information on, excuse me, on how to get started doing the testimonials. I'm trying to flip through here and see what we wrote. So check those out. We've listed about 4 questions that you can ask a person who, if they've had a really good experience with your nonprofit, if it's a donor who just absolutely loves you guys, or if it's one of your clients that, you know, just absolutely loves you, you can use this type of information to get those testimonials. And once you have a collection of those, you can use them in places like your website, or you can post them on social media, or you can put them in your marketing materials. Lots of different places that you can do that. And all of this visibility that you have to work on with your nonprofit, you know, it's kind of like businesses out there. You notice everybody's always trying to compete for commercial time, or everybody's trying to compete for shelf spaces. You know, if your product is up on a higher shelf, it's a better quality and something more people want. You know, it's kind of, nonprofits are competitive too. You know, you have to go out there, you have to put yourself out there, you have to market for yourselves, you have to advocate for yourself in order for donors to take notice of you. Okay. And it's just the way it is. You know, you can't just sit back and not do anything. You have to do something. And so I want to take a quick moment here and check in with Sandy and see if there's anything you have to share, anything more about messaging or information that's more shareable on how that attracts more donors.
Well, I could probably talk all afternoon about messaging, and actually I think I do have webinars about that. And as a matter of fact, I think one of the next ones that's coming up is about what to say and how to say it. So we're going to talk even more about that. But I do think it's very important to be clear about what you want to say about your programs and how you want to talk about how you're changing people's lives. Now, I know at first blush that can be like, duh, are you kidding? Well, we want to talk about that. Well, it really does make a difference when you're, the one thing that I will say about this is when you're talking about your programs, you want to focus more on the outcome and what's changing rather than how you do it. So you don't necessarily want to talk about, well, we've got 6 programs in 7 counties, and you know, we're accredited and we have this, we have that. People don't really care. They want to know about how you're making a difference and how you're changing lives. So the way that you talk about it is super critical, and that's why we spend a lot of time in the program talking about messaging. And I do love this. I love this example that Leah has on the screen here of this Facebook post from the funder. Like what a compliment that is to have the funder share something about your organization, for the funder to be so proud of what you're doing, and they're so proud of investing in your work that they want to share it on their social media. To me, that is a very, very high compliment. And boy, you know you're doing something right when that sort of thing happens. So I think the more that you can talk about your organization in a way that is exciting to the funder, the more likely this sort of thing will happen, which is very exciting.
Thank you very much. Hang tight. Try to get this next one. There we go. All right, so then next on the list, and last on the list, is evaluating impact. And I'm going to tell you honestly, this is the weakest point for nonprofits. This is where I think nonprofits just get so caught up in the day-to-day operations and minutia of things, and they just go, full force, forward. That's all they can do. And lots of times they don't just stop and figure out how things are going. Okay, so successful programs, you have to build into them intentional check-ins as you go. You know, whether you're starting a pilot program or if you've had a program going for 10 years, it doesn't matter. You need to check in regularly to see how things are going. And you have to do this periodically. And when I was at Habitat for Humanity, when I was at Hands on Nashville, one of the things we always did, we always had team meetings and we always had staff meetings. So I was in the development departments every 2 weeks. We'd get together as a development department to talk about fundraising and marketing and communications and all these pieces. And then we would also get together as staff, all of us. Oh my gosh, at Habitat, we were all shoved into a conference room. There was like 40 of us, and we're all shoved into this small little room. But it's times to just stop and say, okay, programs, how are things going? Let's hear from you, and you tell us what's going on. And what was cool about it is as the program heads each provided their reports, you would have other people listening in on that and being able to offer up different ideas. So when I was at Habitat, if we had the construction department going around talking about what they're doing, and if I was working on a grant, I could go, wait a minute, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing in this grant. And so that was my way of evaluating what they were doing and making sure that they were continuing to go. And then also we'd have cross-departmental meetings too. So just like I said with the construction, I would get the grants to build the houses. Well, I needed to make sure the construction department was doing everything that we are promising to do with the grant. So I would have meetings with them to check in and see how things were going. Reviewing periodically. So this is talking a little bit more within your program about reviewing things when your unit is up. So for instance, if you are doing a program that is separated or segmented by, let's say, semesters, every time your semester is over, stop, do a debrief with everybody on your team and your supervisors and check in on how things went. Also, see if you're tracking towards your goals. So if you've got your SMART goals and you've got all your objectives, and you should have benchmarks. And so and benchmarks are just where you should be along the way. So maybe in your program, the first 3 months of the year, you should, have adopted out 20 dogs. And midway through the year, it should be 40 dogs, and so on and so forth. And so you're checking in periodically in those areas to see how things are doing. And if at the very least, every program should do a 1-year check-in, okay? So this offers them the opportunity to take a look back at the entire year, to see how things went, to see if they need to keep doing what they're doing, see what resources they need, and also, do we need to make program adjustments? Like my example with the urban farm when I was at Hands on Nashville, we were just cruising along for a couple of years and everybody was happy with it. But then all of a sudden we started going, wait a minute, something isn't going right because we're not doing volunteerism anymore, we're doing education. And so we decided to make those program adjustments. So definitely make sure that you are checking in periodically, checking in regularly and reviewing things periodically. And then next, analyzing the evidence. And I could get on a soapbox about collecting data and analyzing data because I'm a numbers person and I can find trends and patterns and everything. So I'm going to try and go easy with you on analyzing the evidence. But basically, you just want to look at your numbers. You want to look at the proof that you have that your nonprofit is successful. Okay, remember the stories we were talking about and the testimonials and all this stuff? That's proof too. That's evidence as well. So it's not only that we had 100 people go through our program and successfully graduate from our program. It was what happened, in their lives. What kind of follow-up surveys did you provide them to try and find out more information? Because again, if you're always trying to look forward, you need to look at the information you have in front of you to see if it's pointing forward to that goal that you're trying to make. Otherwise, you could be getting feedback from people in your programs going, well, it's not what we thought it would be. And so that gives you information then that you can say, well, apparently we're not doing what we thought we were doing, and let's make those program adjustments. So ask yourself questions when it comes to analyzing data and looking at all of this proof that you have of your success and everything that you accomplished. Ask yourself things like, did we accomplish what we set out to accomplish with this program? How are the lives of those we served better as a result of this program? What change will occur as a result of this program? Okay, so really good stuff to ask yourselves. And then lastly, in doing all of this and evaluating your impact, it's going to help inform your future planning. okay? And so I can also get on soapbox about which comes first, planning or budgeting, because a lot of people say, well, we don't know how much money we need until we plan for stuff. But other people are saying, well, we can't plan for stuff if we don't know how much money we're going to have, right? Which is where fundraising's going, hey, leave us alone. We'll bring in as much as we can. So informing future planning, it's helpful for that, so that you know that you are moving forward, that you're not stopped, and that you're moving forward the way that you need to be, okay? And again, if you need to make any changes or adjustments, you can do that as well. In your handouts on page 14, this very last page, we threw in a checklist of reportable impacts. So it's some items on there that'll get you going and get you thinking about the types of measurable things that you want to start, well, measuring. All right. And then, so we've talked about these 5 things, and they're all super, super, super vital, important parts of any successful programming. But I also just want to do this as a noticeable mention, you know, don't forget about planning for things like recruitment. And by recruitment, I mean of people like your program participants and even your volunteers, okay? Timelines, just kind of like when we were talking a little while ago about checking in periodically, those type of timelines should exist on your overall timeline. So your milestones and your deadlines and anything else that you need to meet, any other timeline you need to meet. Then, of course, I mentioned earlier, your marketing communications. You want to work together with these folks, or maybe that's you and you just have 2 different hats, but you need to make sure that you're partnering with, that you're using marketing and communications very strategically to get out those successes and everything that you have, okay? You want to make sure that you're talking to your donors about the successes you've had, that you're giving them those warm touches, and that you're keeping them informed of all the goings-ons and the happenings with your organization. And then lastly, not lastly, but one of the last things we'll talk about with this is budgets, right? So numbers, we got to make sure that we're bringing in the money we need to pay for those costs that the program, oh my gosh, that the program is costing us. So yeah, lots of information. With all that said and done, I just want to bring your focus back to where we originally started, which was being sure to stay focused on your impact. Oh my gosh, I keep using these words over and over again. I need a thesaurus. So I wanted to share with you a few questions that your nonprofit can ask itself in order to keep all this focus, okay? I know you guys deal with a lot of everyday things, and again, you're just running around like crazy just trying to get to the next thing, and sometimes it's easy to lose sight of what's most important, which is how best you guys can help those you serve, right? So make it a habit of asking yourselves these questions on a regular basis. The first one being, what do we want to accomplish with this program? Okay, so what are our goals? What are our objectives, really? How will quality of life be better for those you serve? Okay, so try and figure out those ways to collect information from the people that are in your programs. Ask them if they had a good experience. Ask them what you guys could do better. You know, the more you know from them, the better you know how you're doing as an organization, okay? What change will occur as a result of this program? So determine how to demonstrate this change that's happening to your community and to your donors and even to your decision makers. You know, and it's not just the donors that are important here. We also have all these important government people and all these politicians and all these other folks out there that we need to view as partners to help us make this change together. Then lastly, why do we want this change to take place? You know, so keeping yourselves in check and making sure that you're not experiencing mission creep, or maybe you do need to change some things, but just always stay focused on why you want that change to take place. All right, so last but not least, we're almost done here. I just wanted to reflect on what successful programs are, okay? So successful programs are an extension of your nonprofit's mission, as your nonprofit's mission. As I mentioned earlier, just make sure your programs align with what it is that your programs are doing. And also, successful programs are planned with a team of individuals and especially those that have unique perspectives about what you're hoping to accomplish. So, if you're planning a new program, or even if it's your current one, it doesn't hurt to just bring in a bunch of different people, bring in some donors, bring in, board members, bring in the person who answers your phone. You'd be surprised. The person who's answering your phone and fielding all those calls, you'd be surprised what kind of input that those folks have on how that nonprofit maybe should be ran or needs to be ran, but they can provide some very, very valuable insight into that. So bring in lots of people and just say, hey, we're assessing the program. What's your take on it? What are your thoughts? And then lastly, a successful program is something a donor or a funder can really get behind and invest in. So if you've done all these great things and you've got pieces in place and you're following your plans and you're getting all that information out there, then donors, it's going to be hard for them to say no. If you find the right donors and you go out there, you tell them all the good stuff, it's really, really, really going to be hard for them to say no. All right. So that's what we have today. Sandy, what do you have? What else do you want to say?
I was just sitting here thinking about one of my very first experiences as a staff fundraiser. We had so many programs at the food bank, and all good programs. And I found that the more that I dug in and understood my programs, the more detail I had, the more I could describe them, the easier it was to raise money for all of them. And I think really that is the gist of this webinar today, is that we want you to understand that you can't just say, hey, we're feeding people, or hey, we're rescuing animals. You got to have a little more to it than that. And if you follow along and work through some of these questions that Leah has shared, you're going to be in a much better state and much better able to speak intelligently, which is going to reflect well on you and the organization, but to also give funders and donors the information that they want and need. And I found that just the exercise of going through trying to put together a fact sheet on a program, or the exercise of really digging deep into a program, it was so incredibly helpful. I'll share one really crazy thing that I did early on. And y'all, I'm a really big believer in following your intuition. When your intuition flares and you get a thought, you get a nudge, the idea pops in your head that you should do something, do it, trust it, follow it. There was a report out at that point on it was about the state of hunger in children across the United States. It was pretty new. I think the Annie Casey Foundation had put it out. And so I'm looking at that going, that is really, really interesting, but I don't want to share numbers from the entire U.S. I want to share local numbers. I want to know, and I know my donors would be really curious about the state of hunger in East Tennessee, because that was the area where we are. So I set out, and it was one of these weird things. I didn't ask permission to do this. I just did it. I just went out, almost as if I was writing some kind of thesis or some small book about what hunger in Tennessee was like in whatever year that was. And it was crazy. And I wound up doing a lot of research, but I had to interview my program staff to fully understand from their perspective what was it like. And I talked to some people that we were serving and what's it like for them. And then I remember talking to the guy at the food stamp office to try to understand what he could share and exactly how food stamps worked. And I collected so much information, it was ridiculous. And I wound up putting it all together into a booklet. We had it printed. It was beautiful. It was all done in black and white, which made it very stark. And that was very on brand to talk about hunger in something that was all black and white, or even sepia colors would have worked. So we published this thing, and then, and so it was great. It helped me with grants. And actually, back in the day when I was writing grants, because I'm 100 years old, we were able to do hard copy attachments. So I could put this with a grant proposal when I was hand delivering it, putting everything in the envelope, and it worked really well. And then we did a press release about it, and the media picked it up. And so now all of a sudden, everybody in town saw us as the experts in hunger, especially hunger when it came to children, because I had put this little booklet together. And I did that because I was curious, because I was answering some of these exact same questions that we're sharing with you today. And it was a really amazing thing. Did it take a lot of time? Yes. It took me quite a lot of time. Was it easy? No. It took a lot of brain power to really think through it, but when I put it together, I was so proud of it because I was able then to share out and really go deeper. And my understanding of our programs and what we did and why we did it went so deep it wasn't even funny. It actually made me a better speaker when I would go out and do speaking gigs because I understood the program so incredibly well. So I share all that to say this is important. Don't brush over it. Take it very seriously because the more you understand and can explain the need that your programs are addressing, the more you can explain how you're changing lives, just the easier everything is going to get. The easier fundraising is going to get. The easier going after grants is going to get. And it all starts by answering all these questions that Leah has shared with you today. So that's my spin on it. I think there's a lot of value in it. I think, when I look back at how fast I raised money and how much money I raised in a very short period of time, I think that had a lot to do with it, just understanding the numbers.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for that. All right. Well, I hope you guys, you need to take a look at everything you've got written down there. And I know you've got like 14 pages of stuff, but if there's one thing that just popped out at you today, why don't you go ahead, Sandy says this all the time, why don't you go ahead and circle that thing? And don't lose sight of that and come back to it tomorrow or, schedule some time on your calendar to come back and look at it and just get started working on one thing. That's all it takes, just one thing to get everything moving forward. And like Sandy said, I promise you, if you get your program squared away, the rest of it should become much easier.
It will be.
All right. So looking at what's getting ready to come up, the next webinar is on March 7th. And you guys are getting a break from me from January, and you get Miss Sandy back. So that one's going to be what to say and when to say it. And then also, I'm super happy to announce that we've got a brand new grant series, and it's called Secrets to Getting More of the Grants You Apply For. And this is something we've been working on for the last few months, and we're tickled pink to offer it to our Project SmartSprout folks for 50% off. And so that's going to make it just $97 for these 6 webinars that we're going to be doing. And it's talking about how to dig deep for grant prospects and a little bit more in programming and how to create budgets from your organizational information and just talking more about the things that we talked about today. Okay, so that's only about $16 each for those webinars. So I really hope you guys check it out and that you want to dive in. I know we've already got some people signing up and I'm super excited about it. If you do decide to do this, use that promo code GRANTS97. You just go online, punch that in. When you pay for it in full, you'll get that discount. And I really, 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 really hope to see a bunch of you guys there. All right. Well, let's take a look at the questions. And apparently I've answered everybody's questions so perfectly that they just don't have any more. So that's good. That's really good. Well, that's okay. After you guys watch this, and I know it's probably a lot of information to soak in because I do that. I love throwing all kinds of information to you guys because it's just all up in my head, and I love sharing with people. So a day or two from now, if you think about something and you just have a burning question, you can't get rid of it, or you just want to know more about it, just reach out to me. You guys can tag me in the Facebook group. I'm always there, and I'm always trying to interact and engage in your conversations. So it doesn't matter if it's, grants, of course, I'm all about some grants, but, I used to do program management and, habitats and volunteer resource agencies. I've got a lot of experience with those. So volunteerism is near and dear to my heart as well. So don't be afraid to jump in there and ask me any questions. All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you next time and hope everything is well with you. So we'll talk later. See ya.
Bye, everybody.